I am very privileged today to be interviewing Jess Ronnie. She is an author, speaker, podcast host at Coffee with Caregivers, associate producer of the Unseen documentary about caregivers, and caregiver advocate. She is founder and executive director of the Lucas Project, a nonprofit dedicated to providing recognition, resources, and respite support for special needs families. She and her husband Ryan live in Michigan with their 8 children, including their son Lucas, who has numerous disabilities. You call yourself a reluctant caregiver, Jess. I take it this is not a role that comes naturally to you. How were you first thrust into a caregiving role?
Honestly, as I look back on the scope of my life, I think I was thrust into a caregiving role at around 2 years old. I am the oldest of 12 children, and I was born, and then my mom had twins immediately after me, and she went on to just have a baby every 2 years or so. And all the pictures I look back on are 2-year-old Jessica holding, one of the baby twins. So and then it just kind of continued. I was a nanny throughout college, went on to have my own children, including my son Lucas, who does have numerous disabilities. And, I just joke, if I were the Almighty looking for this voice of caregivers, as I've so oddly become, I would not pick Jess Ronnie. I'm just not super sympathetic. I write about how when a child is sick, I'm like, here's your movie and your bucket. Let me know if you need anything. And somehow in his great wisdom, he tagged me it. And here I am trying to do the best that I can. I am a doer, a fixer, a problem solver. And when I see a problem, I do tackle it head on. So maybe it does make me, the perfect candidate for the role.
I'm sure those gifts make caregiving easier for you than it might be for someone who doesn't have the gift of organization or clear management. Lucas is your high needs child. His father passed away after a struggle with brain cancer, leaving you with 4 young children, including Lucas, of course. How did you cope with that enormous loss?
I look back on that period of life and I really have no idea. I was absolutely drowning. It was literally moment by moment. There was a lot of anger, a lot of wrestling with the Lord. I do not understand why you heap all these brain issues on me. Jason had brain surgery at one point, and Lucas had brain surgery a few weeks later. So
Oh,
I was caring for the two of them. And I did have a massive support system as Jason was walking through his cancer battle for 3 years, the local school, local churches. I did not cook a meal for probably 3 years. I didn't do yard work or laundry or house cleaning. But in contrasting that, in raising a disabled child for 20 years, there hasn't been much help for that caregiving role. But I had more help than I knew what to do with my caregiving role for my late husband. So I just think that's a really interesting thing that we should really explore as a society, why we're so willing to jump into these short-term caregiving situations that people walk through, but we're so hesitant to walk into a really extensive long-term care situation for especially special needs families.
we have something in common. My young husband died unexpectedly, leaving me with 2 baby boys. And I remember the lavish support I got for about the first month, and then it all of a sudden died. Of course, I didn't have the additional challenge of a special needs child where the need for support goes on for years. I love your statement that life is not found in the past or the future, but in every present moment. How do you keep yourself in the present moment rather than, listing all the what ifs? Why did this happen? What if that had happened?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. I think a lot of us live in the past or the present, the past and the guilt and the shame of why didn't we do it differently, or why did we not seek out treatment sooner, or the present. What if my loved one dies? What if they never go into remission? What if there's not a future residential option for my child where the joy, life, the meaning of life is found in the present? And if we can remind ourselves, which I still have to do constantly, remind myself, stay present. And I think for me, it's breathing through those moments. It's an acknowledgement of life is found here in the present moment. It's even going about my day without the constant chatter and the noise. And for me, that practice involves even walking every day with nothing but silence, just my thoughts and God, and being very present with everything that's going on around me. So it's just like working any other muscle. I think we have to work this brain muscle to become comfortable with being in the present, because it's not a real comfortable feeling for any of us.
I've heard so many people mention that it is a muscle that needs to be developed, like gratitude needs to be developed, or staying in the present moment is a skill that needs to be developed. You mentioned several things you've learned from being the mother and caregiver to Lucas. What are they?
Oh,
Or what are the
yeah.
topics that come to your mind?
I think the number one thing that comes to my mind is that caregiving is the most important work we can do here on earth. And it's not often respected or valued. And I do want to devote the rest of my life to trying to bring it the respect and the value that caregiving deserves, because, we enter the world needing care. Most likely we will leave this world needing care. And we're fortunate if we don't require it in between. And caring for Lucas for 20 years has taught me that it is holy work. It is the most important thing that we can give or gift to another individual who cannot care for themselves. He has also taught me to accept others and their differences, to see other people and what they're going through, and not only to see people, but to ask. I think we're so busy and um, just immersed in our own lives that we don't even know our neighbors anymore. We don't know the people who live right down the street or sit next to us in church, or ride the school bus with our children. And everybody's going through some sort of battle. And if we would just open up and be more vulnerable, I know I get asked that question a lot. How can you be so vulnerable? And I just think, why wouldn't we be? We're all going through the same thing called life. We all have very similar struggles. My struggles are not unique to me. You just said you also lost your husband. So if we would open up and begin to be more vulnerable with one another, and then not just talk about the problem, but really step in and offer some tangible help in some way, I think we would see a lot of the current problems we have in our world disappear, including a lot of the mental health issues, because as human beings, we just want to be seen.
Yes. What is the most valuable kind of support that you have received? If you're, you want your audience to be more caring in giving support to those who are going through struggles, what have you found to be the most useful kind of help?
I think the kind of help that doesn't accept no for an answer, whatever that may be. As caregivers, we're so good at sort of holding the world on our shoulders and saying we're fine, everything's fine, I'm going to be fine, and we're not fine one single bit. So be the kind of person that doesn't accept our "it's fine" answer, and really press the issue and say, I'm going to bring you dinner on Wednesday night. Do you prefer lasagna or tacos? And I'll just
Uh-huh.
drop it. I'll drop it on your front porch so you don't even have to do anything. You don't have to see me or clean your house or put
Yeah.
makeup on, you know? Or we have a church crew. We're going to show up Saturday and we're going to do some yard work. Can you leave us a list, on your front porch of what you want us to take care of? And then just show up and do it. And I would say too, don't ever feel like if you want to step into a caregiving family's life and help them, don't feel like you have to offer respite care. Um, that's that's a trust issue and it's a relationship issue. And I don't think most of us expect that you provide respite care for our disabled child or for our aging parent when we don't know you that well or that relationship hasn't been established. But
Mhm.
do just look at your gifts and your skill sets. And if you cut hair, offer to cut my hair in the comfort of my home so I don't have to leave my loved one. Or, if you detail cars, offer to come over and detail our vehicles or, whatever your skill set is. I think it can be really used positively to help a caregiving family.
I love that answer. Thank you for that, Jess. I'm curious to know how you met Ryan.
That's a fun story. Um, the interesting thing is at Jason's funeral, Jason's mom pulled me aside and said, Jess, I'm praying for your next husband. And
Wow.
I said, Mom, I am not in the frame of mind to think about getting married again. And she said, No, with these four young children, I had four children, 7 and under, including Luke. She said, you can't do this on your own. Jason ran his race, and it's time for another man to enter in and help
What,
you raise these children.
what an amazing gift from a mother-in-law.
Yes, it was incredible. And a couple of months later, after Jason's death, I got all my kids ready. We went out trick-or-treating. It was Halloween night, and I came home and I checked my blog, which I had kept updated through the 3 years that Jason was fighting cancer. And there was a stranger who had followed me throughout those 3 years. She lived in Pennsylvania. I lived in Michigan. She just wrote a comment on my blog and she said, I have no idea why I'm asking you to check out this man's blog, but there's a widower in Oklahoma who lost his wife to brain cancer 4 days after Jason died, and he has three young children, and he's not doing very well. And I think you could be a source of encouragement to him. So I went and found his blog, just left a little comment, and I woke up the next day to an email from this widower, and that led to numerous emails, numerous phone calls. We met a few months later, and we were married within the year. Cliff
Gosh,
Notes, Cliff Notes version.
but what an amazing man he has to be. Well, first of all, for you together to be taking care of 8 children, but for him also to be willing to step into a caregiving role with Lucas.
Mhm.
Pretty amazing couple you are. Together you have
Aw.
8 children. How do you meet the needs of that many children when Lucas needs so much care?
It has been challenging. And the kids definitely recognize that Lucas does require a lot of care. And, we have a lot of conversations. We try to encourage our kids. They all have a hard story except for our youngest, Annabelle, who was the one that we had together, but they each lost a parent to brain cancer. So everyone in this family really has a very difficult story. And we have a lot of conversations about how this is your story and it's up to you, you know, about how you're going to use your story for good, or you can wallow in the unfairness of it. But I now have four children living outside of my home. Four are still at home, and they have become the most empathetic, sympathetic, independent individuals who see other people and really try to step in and serve other people. And I could not be more proud as a mother that they are using their story for good in the world. And we did our best. The dinner table was a high priority for us when our kids were young, all gathering around the dinner table at the end of the day. We also very much operated in sort of a tribal operation where it was about the family unit. It wasn't so much about everybody's individual needs, but we gathered around and we helped each other. And if somebody was struggling, we really tried to gather around that individual and strengthen them for the time. And now Lucas, we created a group home for Lucas, and we are definitely seeing the younger ones take advantage of the fact that we have a lot more time now, which
Huh?
they are deserving of that. They have had to sacrifice a lot for their brother, but they all love their brother dearly and would continue to sacrifice and will continue to sacrifice, I'm sure, for the rest of their lives.
Yes. What a wonderful story. I'm so glad I asked that question because I recognized it would really take a lot of conscious intention to meet the needs of the other seven children in addition to the needs, of course, of Lucas. Every caregiver I've interviewed so far has mentioned the need to prioritize self-care. How did you do that, or how do you do that now?
Yeah, the thing is, in terms of caregivers, I was really, really intentional about prioritizing self-care. I would take a walk every day for a couple of hours, try to shake the stress out of my body. I would stretch every evening. My husband and I would come together most mornings and pray before we start our day. We tried to prioritize a weekly date night. And in saying all of this, and even eating healthy, I think that's part of self-care is taking care of your body so you feel good, getting enough sleep. Even in doing all of these things, I was still in constant pain for years. Absolutely debilitating pain at times where I could hardly get out of bed. My hips just ached so badly. So, what I've learned to understand and realize now that Luke has lived in a group home for 10 months, that pain is completely gone. So
Wow.
all that pain was stress. It was living in constant fight or flight. It was sleeping beside a baby monitor for 20 years of life. It was waking up all throughout the night, even to the best of my ability, trying to prioritize sleep. And so just admonishing other caregivers to really try to get that stress under control. And I know it is very, very challenging because, like I said, I was very intentional about a lot of self-care, but I was still in constant pain.
Our bodies just don't lie, do they?
They don't.
We can't separate our body from what's going on in our mind, our emotions. You've tackled the amazing purpose of providing care for caregivers. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, primarily have tackled it through starting a nonprofit called the Lucas Project, where we see and serve parent caregivers with recognition, respite, and resources through a variety of programs and initiatives. A couple of the things that I think have really brought awareness to parent caregivers, one being the unseen film, How We're Failing Parent Caregivers and Why It Matters. That was just a great idea I had one day. My family often says my tombstone will say, Jess had a great idea. And then she had some bad ones too. But
Uh,
I just had this idea I threw out on Facebook that into the Facebook world saying, I really feel like we should make a film that documents a special needs family and what that looks like for that family. And if there's a filmmaker or producer out there who wants to partner with me, I would love to talk to you. And the next day, there was a message from a filmmaker and a producer living in Nashville. And
wow.
we met for lunch. And 4 years later, we created this film that ended up on PBS last year. It's headed to ABC this February. So we're really excited about the awareness that this documentary has brought to caregiving families. And now we're starting a second film called Uncertain, which will explore the housing crisis for disabled adults and their families living here in America.
Oh gosh, I love your boldness to just toss the invitation out there and get some responses. It was meant to be. I read it with interest. I read that you've learned to be protective of what you call a ground vision. You learned the hard way not to announce the vision too early. Can you share with us, your reason or what happened when you shared your grand vision too soon, or and what, well, I think you just outlined what your grand vision is as far as caregivers and housing.
Yeah, I'll just use the example of the group home we created for Lucas. I was very excited about this great idea and so excited that we were also going to be able to serve other families in this endeavor of creating a group home for our son. And, created a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and we started a GoFundMe page and solicited lots of donations. And the it didn't necessarily backfire, but we could only serve 4 families in this group home that we were creating because it was going to be an unlicensed home. And when we had to say no to some families, it didn't necessarily go over well. And
Yeah.
so I've learned to pull back a little bit, and even my vision didn't entirely turn out the way that I had initially envisioned it. Because we'd never done this before. We were building something that nobody had ever created before in West Michigan, and I had never done it before. And we were just walking blindly into this great idea. And
Yeah.
as you meet with, township officials, and you meet with community mental health officials, and you meet with the state of Michigan, and you learn, oh, we're not allowed to do that, or oh, we have to pivot, or we have to shift this. So I've learned to just hold those grand visions a little bit closer to my chest, because the disappointment, I don't enjoy disappointing people. And it was even more than disappointment. I received some death threats even from
Oh,
not being able to serve hundreds of families with this one home. And so I have just pulled back a little bit, and I've been a little bit more careful about announcing everything, and a little more intentional about maybe creating it first and then going public with it.
I'm so sorry. It's such a, I recently agreed to organize a TEDx event, and it looked simple in the beginning, but it's been such a steep learning curve, and I've made so many mistakes. I'm sorry for, well, I'm grateful that you took on this vision, and also sorry for the struggle of all the learning that you've had to do in order to manifest this vision. You share in the article 5 things I wish I knew when I first became a caregiver. One of those is to ditch the martyr caregiver syndrome. What is that?
That's the syndrome that says, I don't need anybody's help and nobody can do the job as well as I can do it. Some mothers might know this syndrome as well.
Yes.
So, um, I think that we become so invested at times in our caregiver identity that we forget that we do need to step away and prioritize time for ourselves so that we can be the best version of a caregiver for our loved one. And there's nothing selfish in that. I'll also say, you're no good to anybody if you die. Or you become very ill because you don't take care of yourself. So the best thing that you can do if you truly love your loved one is to take some time, prioritize yourself, remove yourself from the situation consistently, and allow other people to step in and help every once in a while, and accept the fact that they probably won't do it exactly like you would, but
Yes.
that's okay. Maybe your loved one needs a change, you know, that's
Yeah.
okay for a short period of time. Everybody will survive and it will be fine.
I love that answer. Thank you, Jess. I'm going to end this interview with a quote that you shared from Maya Angelou. If it is true that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, isn't it also true a society is only as healthy as its sickest citizen and only as wealthy as its most deprived? What a profound quote from our dear one, Maya Angelou, and thank you for ending your interview on Authority Magazine with that quote. Viewers can follow the ongoing saga at jussplusthemess.com. Love that website title. Or purchase her latest books, Blended with Grit and Grace, Lovin' with Grit and Grace, and Caregiving with Grit and Grace. And of course, you can go to Authority Magazine and read her article titled Five Things I Wish I'd Known as a Caregiver. Just thank you so much for the time you spent with me today. And I have so much admiration and respect for the work that you have done, first of all, for Lucas, for your own family, but then broadening your scope of influence and blessings who knows how many hundreds of others with your support of caregivers. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure, really a privilege.